Hey guys, we should be looking at a relatively short video today. I'm going to go over this poem that I've got pulled up, and then I'm going to talk about a project we're going to start working on with poetry that's going to be due next Friday, so make sure you pay attention to that. I will post the guidelines online. One thing I want to say really quickly, look back through on Google Classroom and on RenWeb if there's anything you don't have a grade for since we've been out, any of the online stuff. If you've got an A or a 0, and it's because you haven't done it, not something that you made a 0 on, but something that you didn't submit, go back and resubmit that. Make sure you get it done. I try to check those every couple days and make sure I get them in. If I go 3 or 4 days and you've resubmitted something and I haven't put in a grade, send me an email, say, hey, I submitted this a couple days ago. I know it was late, but I was just wanting to make sure that you saw it. I'll go back and check it and put in a grade. I know this online stuff's kind of a pain. I will still give credit all the way to the end of the year as long as you get it done. Now, obviously, if you submit it like Friday night on the last day of school, it's going to be kind of hard for me to give you credit for that. So try to keep up with it. But in general, with this, I'm not going to scream if you're a couple days late on an assignment or if you forget to do one and get it in a few days late. Just let me know if I haven't gotten a grade in a few days for it. So with that said, also completing the sentence for Unit 12 is up on Classroom. Make sure you get that done today. This is Player Piano by John Updike. Pretty simple little poem. John Updike's pretty famous American writer. He's been dead for a few years now. I'll say about 10 or 15 years. He's more known for his prose, his novels in particular. Won 2 Pulitzer Prizes. A pretty famous guy. But he wrote a little bit of poetry. This one is in your Pearl book. I just have it pulled up online because I think it's easier for me to show you this way. We're going to analyze this one and talk about it a bit. And it's going to be kind of an example of what I'm going to have you do on your poetry project. So it's called Player Piano. It gives us a pretty good idea of what it's about. I'll go ahead and read through it. My stick fingers click with a snicker, and chuckling they knuckle the keys. Light-footed my steel feelers flicker and pluck from these keys melodies. My paper can caper, abandon, is broadcast by dint of my den, and no man or band has a hand in the tones I turn on from within. At times I'm a jumble of rumbles, at others I'm light like the moon, but never my numb plunker fumbles, misstrums me or tires a new tune. Okay. That's a little bit difficult to read in places because of all the consonants and alliteration and things he has going on. So I want you to pay attention to all those different sounds because that's something important he's doing here, and that's something you would want to make note of in this project we're going to talk about in a minute. But first, let's just look at this at the basic structural level like we've been talking about the past few days. If we look at number of stanzas, there are 3. They're 4 lines each, so 3 quatrains. You know they're quatrains, a stanza of 4 lines. And each one obviously has a certain rhyme scheme to it. So with 3x4, you've got 12 total lines, 2 short of a sonnet. So it's not a sonnet. It's just 3 sets of quatrains. But then we look at rhyme scheme. So the end of line sounds, we've got snicker, flicker, keys, melodies. So that's A, B, A, B, because snicker gets an A. It's our first sound. Keys doesn't rhyme with snicker, so that gets a B. Flicker does, so that's an A again, and then melodies calls back to keys, so that's a B again. So A, B, A, B is the first one. Really, really simple. Probably the most common rhyme scheme you'll see, that or A, A, B, B. Then down here, this one's a little bit trickier, but it's still similar. So abandon, I'll say C because we've already used A and B up here, and this doesn't rhyme back with any of those. Den, abandon and den are close. You could almost say that this whole stanza is C, 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 C. And if I put this on a test or quiz or something and you did, I would not count it wrong. But I'll explain why I think he's intending it to be a little bit different, and it's the rhythm of the poem. So we're going to say abandon C. I'm going to say den here is D. Hand in. Okay, he's treating that sound like one word, and it's close enough. It's a partial rhyme up here. So I think he's aiming for a C here, then within, den. That's another D. So CD, CD. Again, if you said CC, CC, or if you said like CD, DD, or something like that, I wouldn't yell at you. I think both of those are pretty appropriate for that stanza as well, but I think he's intending CD, CD here. Then we have rumbles. Again, this is a new sound, so we're going to say E. Moon, new sound, F. Fumbles, rhymes with rumbles, E. And then tune rhymes with moon, F. So it's A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F. Very, very simple rhyme scheme for this poem. Very straightforward. If we look at meter, it's going to be anywhere between 8 and 9 syllables all the way down. Pretty consistent meter, pretty firm in that. You're going to have to trust me. I've already counted through all of them. Again, if you're unsure, always just stick that hand under your chin. And every time your chin drops while you say a word, that's 1 syllable. So if we just count through the first line, my stick fingers click with a snicker. So that's my stick, fingers, click with a snicker. That's 9, okay? And it's 9 or 8 all the way down. So he's staying pretty firm on his meter, keeping roughly the same line length. And that creates a rhythm along with that rhyme scheme he's got going. But something else I want us to notice is the internal rhyme, the consonants that he does. So things like chuckling and knuckle, those rhyme with each other inside the line because of that CK sound he's got, that CKL. Stick, click in the first line, they rhyme together. He does something like that all the way down. My paper can caper in the first line of the second stanza. Dent of my den. No man or band. Man and band are partial rhymes. He does this jumble and rumbles in the first line of the third stanza. He does this all the way down. He's got all these internal rhymes, all this alliteration and consonants, repetition of consonant sounds. He used a little bit of assonance, a little bit of that repetition of vowel sounds, all sorts of different rhythmic sound-based things to focus on this. And it's because he's writing about an instrument. He's writing about something that produces music, and this is form following the meaning of the poem. His form, what he's actually doing, the way he's written the poem, follows what he's actually talking about, which is a piano making music. And it's got a very musical, rhythmical quality to it, kind of like someone playing on a piano, which is interesting. And that's obviously his intention here. And this is the kind of thing I want you to pick up on and notice. Now, it doesn't have to be that sophisticated of something you notice. You could just notice, hey, there's a lot of rhythm inside the lines here, and he's writing about a piano. That'd be good enough for me. And I'm not asking you to analyze this poem in particular. Now, if you pick John Updike and do his poetry and you use this one, that's fine. But he's creating that rhythm through sound in a way that mimics the actual playing of a piano, something that drives it forward. And this poem, it doesn't tell a story. It's describing a piano. It's describing the sound it makes. And he uses a lot of onomatopoeia. Again, I think I've told you about this with the poetry terms. I'm pretty sure it's on there. It's where you've got a word that imitates a sound. So like the click with a snicker, feelers flicker, things like that. It's those words are mimicking the sounds that he's actually making, or that his piano is making. A jumble of rumbles. So he's using onomatopoeia as well to create that sound and drive things forward. So these are the kinds of things I want you to pick up on and notice in your poems. Now, your poem might be more narrative. It might be a little bit less descriptive, or it might be more nonsensical and have less meaning than this. And that's okay. Depending on your poet and the poems you pick for the project, it's going to be very different. So let's get to the actual project. I've got some notes typed up. Let's see if I can get to where you can see this well. And I am going to post these on Classroom right after I post this video. It's just going to be copy and pasted from this, so you'll get exactly what you're looking at here. I just want to walk you through them. So for the poetry project guidelines, I want you to pick a poet. Get your parents' approval for your poet. You don't have to get my approval. As long as they are a poet and you can find 3 poems by them, I am fine, okay? You'll have to tell me your poet and your 3 poems in your project. And one day early next week, your homework may be just, in a private message, post your poet and the 3 poems you've chosen, just so I can see that you've got something. I might do that like Tuesday or Wednesday of next week. So, and the reason I say get parental approval, be careful when looking up poets and poems, because some poets are a little more adult than I really want you getting into, and you might pick a poem that looks innocent on the surface and ends up being about something you probably don't want to be talking about. So, yeah, just get your parents to check over it and make sure that they're okay with what you pick. If they're fine with it, I'm fine with it. So then pick 3 poems by your chosen poet. You're going to want to keep them under a page each. Some poems are really, really long. Like, for instance, if you pick T.S. Eliot and you pick The Wasteland, The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, and Hollow Men, you're looking at probably 40 pages of poetry. You don't want to do that, and I don't want to see that, okay? Pick something relatively short. Now, if a couple of them are, a page and a half, 2 pages, that's fine, but try to keep them short. Most poets you're going to look at will have short poems for you to choose from. And I want you to describe the rhyme scheme, the meter, and the overall structure of the poem. So that's basically what I just did with player piano. Rhyme scheme and meter, again, that's something that's pretty simple. And then structure, you don't have to tell me the number of lines, but if it's, 3 quatrains, tell me that. If it's a sonnet, if it's 14 lines exactly, tell me that. If you look it up and it says this poem's an elegy or this poem's an ode, something like that, make sure you tell me. Now, you don't necessarily have to explain what some of those things are, but yeah, do a little bit of research. And and be able to give me a little bit of information about it. It doesn't have to be super in depth. You don't have to go in and be like, this is written in iambic pentameter and all that. If you just say there's 10 syllables per line, it's A, B, A, B all the way down, that's fine with me. I'm not setting any minimum length on the poems you choose. If you pick, 3 poems that are all 4 lines each, that's fine. Just know that you're still going to have to analyze them for me. And sometimes the shortest poems are a little bit more difficult to analyze. So now I want you to explain what you think each poem means. Now, this is a little bit difficult to explain because it's your opinion, but it needs to be an informed opinion, meaning I don't want it to come off the internet. I don't want it to come from your parent or from a friend, which, by the way, you can choose the same poet as someone else. I don't care, but don't just all choose like Dr. Seuss and do the same 3 pieces from Dr. Seuss and say the same things, because I'm going to read them. I'm going to know if you copied someone or if you took information from someone else. Now, yeah, if you end up with the same poet and a couple of the same poems as someone else, but you say things that are different, that's fine. But when it comes to explaining what you think each one means, I want you to read the poem and I want you to interpret it. I want you to tell me what you think it means. As long as you're using the actual poem, and when I say a few sentences, I mean, 3 or 4. If you write long sentences and you can do it in 2, that's okay. If you write really short, choppy sentences and it takes you 5 or 6, that's okay. That's why I'm not setting an exact limit there. So for each poem, you're going to write, probably about 3 or 4 sentences. Tell me what you think it means, what you think it's about, what you think it's trying to say. I don't have to agree with what you think it means. Your parent doesn't have to agree. The internet doesn't have to agree. This is what you think. I want you to read a poem and interpret it for yourself. Then type up a brief summary of the poet's overall work. Now, what that means is I don't want you to go on Wikipedia and copy and paste or pull up something off like poetry.org or something that says, this poet wrote strictly in iambic pentameter in the 16th century and blah, blah, blah. I don't want that. What I want is for you to take what you've seen, the 3 poems you've looked at or any others that you might have looked at while you were searching through their work, and talk about things that you saw that were in common in all of their work that you looked at. If they wrote strictly in sonnets, like every poem they wrote was 14 lines, tell me that. If everything they wrote had a strict rhyme scheme and meter, tell me that. If they wrote only in free verse, like no rhyme scheme, no meter, tell me that. If they wrote exclusively about chickens, tell me that. So it can be about the actual meanings of the poems. If you don't see a lot as far as structure that's in common, but they write a lot about nature or horses or war or something like that, there's a theme that they have in common, tell me that. And this doesn't have to be, some crazy in-depth thing either. I'm looking for maybe a paragraph here. So if you say 3 or 4 sentences for each poem's basically a paragraph, and this is basically a paragraph, you're looking at about 4 paragraphs. And then where you talk about the rhyme scheme, meter, and structure, which is just a few bullet points. This doesn't have to be structured like an essay. This can be structured as individual little paragraphs where you explain different things. And if you wanted to put the rhyme scheme, meter, and structure of each poem with the meaning of it and have just, a paragraph per poem that was like 5 or 6 sentences and then one about the poet's work and have a 4-paragraph essay, you could do that. The structure is kind of up to you. I do want it typed up in MLA just for good practice. I'm not necessarily going to look at the MLA too closely as far as when I come to grading it. But if it's not in MLA, you will lose some points. We'll say -10 if you don't attempt to put it in MLA. Now, if your page number is the wrong font, I'm not taking off points on this because I'm not going to take it and edit it, give it back, and get it back again. We're not going that in depth. But this will probably be 1 or 2 pages long when you're done with it. You don't have to post the poems on the paper. You can just tell me the poet and the poems. I'll probably know most of them. And then you can just, type your analysis of each poem, type about the poet's overall work, like the things you found in common, basically a summary of the 3 things you did. And that's it. It's not that complicated. It's not that hard. It should be a really easy test grade. What you see is the bottom there. It's going to be counted as a test grade, 100-point test grade. We haven't had a lot of these this 9 weeks. Put some effort into this. Make sure it's good. It should be relatively fun as far as, online English homework goes. It'll be more fun than doing vocab and stuff. Because you get a little bit of say in what you're actually doing and who you're doing it about. I'm not assigning you a poet. And this is due next Friday, which is May the 1st. That gives you, about a week and a half to work on it. It shouldn't be too crazy. You shouldn't be too pressed for time. You get all weekend. If you do encounter any problems, if you're confused, if you just, if you say, I don't know a poet, give me one, email me or send me a message on Classroom. I can always assign you a poet. You might not want me to do that because I'm not necessarily going to pick you the easiest one, but, it's up to you. Again, get your parents' approval on whatever your poet is. If they tell you to ask me, sure, ask me. But in general, you don't have to get my approval. And this that you could pick, Dr. Seuss wrote mostly in poetry. It was narrative poetry, stuff like The Cat in the Hat. His stories are written in rhyme, though, so I consider it poetry. I'm realizing now this video is not nearly as short as I thought it would be. Sorry. And if you wanted to pick A. Milne, the guy who created Winnie the Pooh, anything like that, that's fine. I don't care if it's a children's poet. I don't care if it's an adult poet. Just make sure it's nothing inappropriate, and we should be good. Any questions about this or the poem we analyzed or anything else, just let me know. Make sure you get completing the sentence done today, and see you guys.